Well, hello everyone. I'm Janet B., recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. Let me add my welcome to Denise's. Nice to be with you all here on this chilly Monday night. Um, and we are going to do, well, I'm going to talk about the chapter Two Wives. If you have your big book, it's on page 102, and I think it's perfect as we're getting ready to see all those relatives we might not see too often and deal with family members. I think there's some good stuff in here. Um, when I was preparing this talk the first time I gave it, I realized like I can't think of too many people who feel lonelier than the wife of an alcoholic, right? Imagine waiting up for him night after night, not knowing when he comes home, if he comes home, whether he'll be sullen and silent or raging and abusive. And imagine if you have kids and you watch your children learn how to be silent and tiptoe around the house and make themselves small so that daddy doesn't notice them. It's easy to imagine this wife, even though she may have been a woman of faith always, to hear her whispering in the dark, like, God, where are you? Do you even hear me? And then we get to this chapter, Two Wives, where it says on page 104 that we want to leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no happiness too great to overcome. And you can almost feel these wives who've gone before her reaching out to this struggling wife saying, you matter to us. And I think if we really look at this chapter closely, we can actually hear God saying, and you matter to me. And of course, isn't that all what we really want to hear? Um, for just a minute before I get into the meat of this chapter, I want to turn back to chapter 4 in We Agnostics for a second, where they tell us the main object of this book. It says to, quote, enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem, end quote. So if this power, this God, is going to solve my problem, of course, the first problem I wanted him to solve is my food problem. If he's going to do that, he must be strong, he must be smart because I couldn't figure out how to solve this problem. And most of all, he must care about me. Otherwise, with like all the stuff going on in the universe, and all we have to do is read the papers from this weekend, and we'll see. God cares about me, about you, about each one of us personally. So that's the God who we matter to, who we're going to try and encounter in the pages of Two Wives. So this chapter generally doesn't get a lot of airplay. Often people skip it saying, well, I'm not married to an alcoholic. It doesn't apply to me. But I think there's lots of principles that we can apply in our own recovery because, right, our recovery isn't primarily about like food plans and meetings. It's about how I practice spiritual principles in all my affairs. And for someone new, that may sound weird, right? When I went to my first OA binging, OA meeting, all I wanted was to stop binging. And all I wanted was that magic food plan. Didn't work. 6.5 years in, didn't work until someone told me I had to have a spiritual experience. Page 25 explains what that is. It's basically God coming in and rewiring my heart. Well, how does that happen? Do I just say a prayer and like God waves a magic wand? Well, no. Um, but what does work and result in a spiritual experience is this 12-step program, which tells me I have to get a conception of God, surrender, clean up my past, and practice these principles in all my affairs. And of course, there's some basic spiritual principles we have to practice right away. Right from day one, we can stop lying, we can stop gossiping. And we don't have to wait till we're through the steps to stop lying and stop gossiping. We're told right away we have to be honest, we have to be unselfish, we have to put spiritual principles to use. And this chapter, Two Wives, is full of some really amazing spiritual principles and some great promises if we practice them. We don't have time to go through every single principle, so I've picked the ones that had meaning to me and that I hope will be helpful. So the first half of the chapter is really about how to help someone who's an addict. And then halfway through, it does this really big switch like, okay, wife, we've talked about your husband. Now let's talk about you and your spiritual issues. So let's dive in on page 104. On the last paragraph there, it says, we want to analyze mistakes we've made. We want to leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. And I love that because it's telling me God is going to do one of two things if I work these principles. He's either going to change my situation or he's going to change me so that I'll be okay in my situation. Like to me, that's a big demonstration of how much I matter to God. Door number one, he sits at his cosmic computer and rearranges things so that my situation is changed. Or door number two, he changes my heart. Either way, I win. Bottom of 106, it talks about what happens to an addict as the sprees grow closer. It says that the deepening pall of remorse, depression, and inferiority settled down on our loved ones, and these things terrified and distracted us. Well, distracted us from what? Um, I know that when I become overly focused on a family member or anything else, but it was usually, let's be honest, my kids, I'm distracted from God. And the way I think of it is like I'm swimming in one of those lap pools that has the lanes roped off, and I'm swimming toward God. And if I start swimming in another lane, I lose focus on God. Other people's recovery in the future are things that are not in my lane. Okay, top of 107, it says that like animals on a treadmill, we patiently and wearily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile attempt to reach solid ground. And it reminds me of that like little hamster in a cage on that wheelie thing. He's working and working and not getting anywhere. And that's how I was in my early days of recovery. I worked really hard and I didn't get anywhere. Well, no, that's not true. I got worse. Even though I was doing a lot of work, I wasn't doing the right work. So my caution here is if you're new, read this big book. And if you're looking for a sponsor, ask your sponsor questions. Ask her, has she done the work in this book? Has she had a spiritual experience? What's her relationship with God like? What's her relationship with her family like? Page 108, second full paragraph, it says, try not to condemn your alcoholic husband no matter what he says or does. Remember, he's just a very sick, unreasonable person. When he angers you, remember that he's very ill. So I see two things they're telling me to practice here with difficult people. And again, this could be a spouse, a boss, children. First, don't condemn. And there's a couple reasons for that. Condemning never works, right? Tell the truth. Who of us ever came here because someone said, you know, you're a really horrible compulsive eater. You're overweight. You're ruining your life. You're ruining other people's lives. Get your act together. And then we said, oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for the condemnation. I think I'll go work a 12-step program and get my act together. None of us are here because of that. Also, if I'm condemning someone, it's dangerous for me spiritually because if I'm condemning you, that means I'm at the top of a mountain and guess where you are? And that means I'm loaded with pride. And the only place to go if we're up on a mountain full of pride is down on our butts. So the second thing it says, when he angers you, remember that he's very ill. Remember, that's a verb. It's an action step I can take. I can remind myself this person is ill, right? When we're resolving resentments, we sometimes say the other person is spiritually sick. If I'm living with a raging alcoholic, that person is spiritually sick. I need to have the kind of compassion I would if I were living with someone who had a brain tumor that made them act in weird ways. Um, oh gosh, when I wrote this, it says a couple months ago. Now it's a number of years ago. I went to pick up my mom for a doctor's appointment. And before I got there, she got agitated and had the front desk of her place call me to see where I was. I was right on time and I was annoyed. Mom, why'd you have them call me? I wasn't late. But a couple weeks later, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So after that, whenever she got agitated or said things that weren't very nice, I didn't have any annoyance or resentment because I knew that she was sick. Okay. They talk about the 4 different types of drinkers and the kind of things we can do to help them depending on what type they are. But at the top of page 111, they start with general principles that can be applied to all. They say the first principle of success is never be angry. I mean, that's kind of hard if you've got someone who's like mentally ill or drinking or abusive. But remember, page 66, it doesn't tell us we will never get a resentment. It tells us we can't harbor resentments. I can't be a safe harbor resentments. I can't just say, well, this person gets me mad and I'm entitled to wallow in it. What I'm supposed to do is acknowledge I'm angry, never like be personally dishonest, and then I have to do something about it. I inventory it, share it with someone, ask God to remove it, and make my amends. And they end that paragraph, first paragraph on page 111, by saying patience and good temper are most necessary. Because again, it's a disease we're dealing with, not a moral issue. The second principle they give us is you should never tell your husband or your son or whoever what he must do about his drinking. I read something the other day in a book that when we give unsolicited advice, it's to quench our own panic. If I'm giving unsolicited advice, it's to quench my own panic. My husband used to smoke. I didn't like it, but I never told him what he needed to do about his smoking. All I did was say, like, honey, we've got a couple of little kids. So if you're going to keep smoking, we need to take out like some big life insurance policy on you. That was me setting a boundary to protect my family. And then I actually asked him, how often can I tell you that I don't like you smoking? And I think he said once a month, and that was it. And by the way, he did ultimately quit smoking about 15 years ago, not because I nagged him. I didn't nag him, but I did get the life insurance. That was a boundary to protect me and my kids. Okay, the third principle here, it says, be determined that your husband's drinking or your child's whatever, fill in the blank, is not going to spoil your life. It is possible to have a full and useful life, the book says, even though your husband continues to drink, even though your children continue to use drugs, even though anything. Our book tells us our recovery isn't dependent on circumstances, it's dependent on our relationship with God. So if I'm too upset over what someone else is doing, then there's a problem with my own relationship with God. I would say for years, the thing that blocked me from a full and useful life was anger and fear surrounding my children. And sometimes a well-meaning friend, not in this program, would say to me, well, it's normal for a mom to worry so much about her kids. You're a mother after all. But I worried because my attention was in the wrong place. So here's a prayer that really helped me a lot with my kids. So hopefully it'll help someone. Lord, I see that I don't really love my children too much. I love you too little in proportion to them. Only if I love you supremely will I love everything and everyone else well and properly. Lord, please capture my heart. Amen. I pray for God to capture my heart so that I love him supremely so I can love everyone else properly. Okay, the fourth principle they list here on this page says, do not set your heart on reforming your husband. You may be unable to do so no matter how hard you try. Remember, this program tells me live and let live. So I can't set my heart on reforming my husband's smoking, my college kid's decision to not go to church, or anyone's eating, drinking, drugging, gambling. They've told me 4 principles so far. Don't get angry. Don't tell him what to do about his drinking. Be determined that his drinking is not going to spoil your life. And don't set your heart on changing this person. And they acknowledge that these suggestions are sometimes difficult, but they say you will save many a heartbreak if you can succeed in observing them. So if my heart is broken, I should ask myself, which of these principles have I violated? Have I gotten angry and harbored resentment? Have I been telling someone what they need to do about what I perceive as their issue? Am I letting what they're doing destroy my life? And am I trying to set my heart on changing someone? Of course, I can hope, I can pray, but my heart needs to be set on one thing primarily, and that's God and me doing his will. And then we get a promise there on the page at the end of the second paragraph, page 115. It says, your new courage, good nature, and lack of self-consciousness will do wonders for you socially. So if I practice these principles, I'm going to start getting more courage. That means my fears are going to go away or at least lessen. I'm going to have a good nature because I'm not going to be so tense by trying to control the world. And I'm not going to worry about what people think about me. And that, of course, will help me be a better friend. Okay, next principle, still on page 115. In dealing with kids and their father, it says it's best not to take sides in any argument he has with them while drinking. So the rule I always had with myself when my kids were little was unless my husband was doing something dangerous, I wouldn't interfere. Now, dangerous does not mean anything I don't agree with, right? Because I could have thought, well, taking them to McDonald's is dangerous. But I'm talking about I should keep my mouth shut unless my husband does something really dangerous, like leaving them alone in the bathtub when they're 2 years old, which of course he never did. But that's something where we can and should speak up. In hindsight, I should have kept my mouth shut a lot more. And they talk about something similar at the beginning of the chapter. If we flip back to page 106, it says, we've tried to hold the love of our children for their father, which is an instinctive thing for a mom to do if she thinks her husband is doing everything wrong and that her kids won't love their father. How many times when my kids were younger did I try and manipulate relationships and think things like, okay, if I don't tell my husband to go outside and play basketball with Daniel when Daniel's like 10 years old, he's not going to have a good relationship with Daniel. And when Daniel grows up, he's going to remember my husband's neglect, right? In my mind, not going out and shooting hoops with him one night is neglect, and Daniel won't like him. Well, Daniel's now 23 and he adores my husband, even more than he adores me, if I'm going to be honest. And I'm the one who would go outside. But remember, my job is to let other people have their own relationships and not try to manage and control them, either to get people to love each other or if I'm unhappy with one family member, to get other family members to be on my side and be mad at them too. Bottom of page 115, seventh principle. Don't lie on behalf of your husband in order to protect him. We are people who have to be honest, even if there will be consequences for another person. In the chapter to employers, it says, sometimes an employer may worry that the guy's drunk and his wife calls and says he's sick. It says, if he's trying to recover and he's drunk, he'll tell you, even if it means the loss of his job. For he knows he must be honest if he would live at all. So we don't try to shield people from consequences by lying. Now, page 116, there's a shift. It's like they're saying, okay, up until now, we've been talking about how to help your husband, but now let's talk about you. They say, we've remarked how much better life is when lived on a spiritual plane. If God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. And I could just see a wife reading it like, whoa, wait, me too? I was here to help the bum I'm married to, and now you're saying me too? Like, no way, Jose. But they gently press on, saying, we wives found, like everyone else, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, self-centeredness, selfishness, and dishonesty. And the bottom of page 116, they say, we used to think we were good, capable of being nicer if our husbands stopped drinking, right? Like I wouldn't have been nasty if my husband, my kids, my mother, my boss didn't fill in the blank, whatever it is. But remember, our recovery is never dependent on circumstances. It's always dependent on our relationship with God. So it says, okay, here's the solution. We try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives. And if we practice the opposite, and the opposite would be humility, gratitude, unselfishness, honesty, and self-sacrifice. It tells us on page 117 that if we practice these things, God will give us a radically changed attitude toward, it says, the husband. Like God sees us. We matter to God. God himself sees the work we're doing, even if our husbands, our kids don't, and God will radically rewire our hearts. So as a result of applying these spiritual principles, it tells me the gifts that God will give me: lack of fear, lack of worry, lack of hard feelings. And then they tell me something that I don't really like. On page 117, it says, okay, all problems will not be solved at once. The old problems will still be with you. This is as it should be. I mean, this is as it should be. Like, God's not going to wave that magic wand and make all the problems go away as soon as I get through my 12th step. But I think I'm learning whenever I go through a difficult situation, like in my own house or, with other people, these difficult situations force me to rely on God more and force me to look at the idols in my life. Do I have an idol of a perfect marriage? That's what some of us do. Do I have an idol of perfect children or the perfect relationship with my children? And that's what drove me for so many years. I was often paralyzed with fear that when my children grew up and were no longer under my control, they wouldn't love me anymore. And that fear led me to alternate between being overly lenient to manipulate them into loving me and overly tough to retaliate when I didn't think they loved me right. Happy to report, God is good. These relationships have been mended, but it took a lot of inventory work and amends and prayer. But my kids are now 23 and 24, and I have a beautiful relationship with both of them. Here's a prayer that I used, which of course can be changed to fit anything that's too important in our lives. It's like a children idolatry prayer. Lord, I entrust my children to you now. I release them to your protective care, knowing that they're much safer with you than in my clinging hands. Please remove all idolatry of my children and my relationship with my children from my heart, so that I don't endanger them or myself. Please remove all fear that I won't matter to them. I release my children to you, and I release my fear to you, so that I'm free to cling to your hand. Thank you that as I entrust my children to you, you are free to shower blessings on them. Thank you that your presence goes with them wherever they go. Thank you that you will guide my children and help them learn to trust you. Thank you that I matter to you. And thank you that your presence stays with me as I relax and trust you. Lord, I'm excited to watch and see what you will do. Amen. Okay, back on page 117, they continue on and they say these workouts, meaning the difficult discussions we sometimes have to have, should be regarded as part of your education. You will make mistakes, but if, so this is a conditional promise, if you're in earnest, they won't drag you down. Instead, you will capitalize them. What does it mean to capitalize on my mistakes? I don't think it means I'm going to be 100% free of things like anger and fear. I don't think in this lifetime it's ever going to be 100%. But here's what can happen. Our bounce back period can get shorter. So whereas before, maybe I got a resentment or a fear and I'd be angry for 3 days or afraid for 3 days or so depressed I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Maybe after working these steps, it's 2 days, then 1 day, then 2 hours. I don't always get it down to 10 minutes, but I can generally keep it at way less time than I used to. And that's one way, by the way, we can tell if we're growing spiritually, if our bounce back period is getting shorter. So, how do we capitalize on our mistakes? The steps teach me I need to look at my part. So, if one of my kids is mouthing off to me, for example, and I get really upset, I don't stop with, she mouthed off to me. My part is I had an expectation that my children don't mouth off to me. I need to go deeper than that and look at what flaw in my makeup is there. I'm making an idol out of how much I matter to my children. That's an idol. And I can tell something's an idol when it doesn't just hurt my feelings. It feels like I got punched in the gut and can't get up. So I identify what my idols are. I talk to someone who won't enable me. We all know the people who we call who are going to enable us. We don't call them. We call the people who won't enable us. We go to God. We tell him we're sorry and ask him to remove the idolatry. and practice the opposite, which is true worship of God. Next principle, bottom of page 117, it says, often you must carry the burden of avoiding resentments or keeping them under control. And in the margin of my big book, I wrote, it's not fair. And maybe it isn't fair, but it's loving. Remember, fairness is not our code anymore. Love and tolerance is our code. What a great opportunity to practice self-sacrifice, right? Which the book tells me I have to do. If someone utters a snarky remark, I try not to start an argument. I absorb it. I let it go. That's a way of practicing self-sacrifice, which is critical to my own recovery. Now, I'm not saying if someone's married to someone who beats them, they're supposed to just take it. That's not what I'm talking about. But the occasional insensitive remark, sometimes it's okay to just let things go. Okay, next principle, page 118, second full paragraph. Your husband knows he owes you more than sobriety. He wants to make good, yet you must not expect too much. I think there's a couple things for us here. One, if I don't expect much, I'm not disappointed. I'm always happily surprised. But also, when it says he wants to make good, I think we're supposed to assume the best about people, that people generally want to do the right thing. So that's, we can like describe either a good motive or a bad motive to it. I think love demands that we ascribe a good motive. Maybe I'm wrong, but isn't it better assuming the best in people than assuming the worst? That's how I want people to deal with me on my cranky days. Okay, next principle, page 119. When resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. So we can intentionally look for our blessings. Like, I've got a job, I've got heat in my house, I have a husband who loves me and supports my recovery work. And we don't just sit there, by the way, and write them on our apps. We thank God for them. Thank you, God, for my husband who provides for me. Thank you that my children are safe. Thank you that, so we don't just write things down like a grocery list. We go to God. That's a way of building our relationship with God by expressing our gratitude to Him. Okay. Critical principle, bottom of page 119. It says, find a great cause to live for. You probably need fresh interest as much as your husband and a great cause to live for. I mean, how lucky are we? Like, we get to recover, we get to help others, get closer to God in the process, and it's all free, right? I personally can't think of a greater cause. And they tell us, top of page 120, how to live that out. Think about what you can put into life instead of how much you can take out. So maybe when we go to places, we think, how can I contribute here instead of what's in it for me? How can I best serve God and the people here? And then finally, they talk about what to do if your husband drinks again. And I love how they deal with this on page 120. They say, perhaps your husband has made a fair start and things are going well, but then he gets drunk. What do? They say, if you're satisfied he really wants to get over drinking, you need not be alarmed. So what they're telling us here is that it's possible to really want to recover but stumble. Remember, in the foreword to the second edition, it says 25% of the original fellows who really tried recovered after some relapse. Imagine if they'd given up on that 25%. And by the way, I would have been in that 25%. So they tell us not to be alarmed at the person's relapse. And they say, though it's infinitely better that he has no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men, it's not a bad thing. So the only way relapse is not a bad thing, if the person sees he has to redouble his spiritual activities if he expects to survive. So what does that mean to redouble our spiritual activities? Work the steps harder, more self-sacrifice for others, more time with God, more surrender of things I don't want to surrender, like more God, more service, more love. And they say, if he gets drunk, don't blame yourself. I am never the cause of someone else's drinking or binging, and no one else is ever the cause of mine. Okay, home stretch here. Bottom of page 120, it says, God has either removed your husband's liquor problem or he has not. If not, it had better be found out right away. then you and your husband can get right down to fundamentals. If a repetition is to be prevented, place the problem along with everything else in God's hands. So there's a lot here and a lot that can help us as compulsive eaters. So let's try to break it down. It says God has either removed your husband's liquor problem or he has not. Or for us, God has either removed our compulsive eating problem or he has not. Like, what does that even mean? Is God up in heaven, like flipping a coin? Heads, I'll remove Janet's eating problem. Tails, she's got to suffer with it. Well, no. They're telling me that if God hasn't removed my food problem, I've not placed my food problem and everything else in his hands. Remember, chapter 4 tells us either God is everything or else he's nothing, meaning either I give God everything or it's as if I gave him nothing. I can't give him my food plan, but cheat on my husband or cheat on my taxes. It doesn't work that way. God has to get everything. So I think what they're telling us is to see, are there things I haven't placed in God's hands? And then we do it. That's what fundamentals are, right? This always makes me think of like middle school social studies where we learned about like the kings who had all the land and he had serfs who worked the land. And as long as the serfs are on the king's land, when the invading army comes to attack, the king pulls up the drawbridges. And if I'm the land, I'm protected. But if I wander off, through dishonesty, resentment, lack of surrender, refusal to make amends, then when the invading army comes and I'm not on the king's land, I'm not safe and protected, not because the king stopped loving me, but because I've wandered off. So they're telling us we're liable to drink or eat compulsively if we wander off the king's land. But the good thing about our king is that he'll always take us back, and I believe he'll go even further and launch a search and rescue mission for us. Final page of this chapter, page 121. The writers of the chapter say, we realize this is hard stuff, but we really want to help you avoid unnecessary difficulties. And then they conclude by saying, good luck and God bless you. They're asking God, like the creator who flung the moon, the stars, the sun, and all the planets into place, to bless us. That means to confer divine favor on us. And if we approach him in humility, he always will. Because whether we are wives living with raging alcoholics who feel we are unseen and unheard, or compulsive eaters who feel our lives are unmanageable and no human power can save us, we matter. Every single person here always matters. We always matter to God. And with that, I will pass.